Two balls and a strike to count on Taylor. Reyes fires, swinging a drive, deep left field. It's his way back. Walk the wall. Chris Taylor.
Hi, everyone. Welcome into DodgerHeads Live, presented by DodgerBlue.com. I'm Matthew Moreno, and joining me again tonight is Blake Williams. And we're coming to you guys with a special episode, one that was not planned for us to be doing, and that's because there is news of the Dodgers closing in on an agreement with James Paxton. So according to multiple reports, Paxton is close to signing a one-year contract that's going to be kind of in the neighborhood of 11 to 12 million. The deal is expected to include incentives, which Fabian Ardaya of The Athletic said is going to be for games started. Blake, what's your kind of instant reaction to this news as it's sort of trickling out? Again, it's not even that they have agreed to a deal yet. That's sort of still to come, but it looks like they're on the doorstep.
Yeah, so Paxton is a guy I've wanted on the Dodgers for probably like 7 years now. He was very good with the Seattle Mariners. He's dealt with some injuries throughout his career, and he last had Tommy John in, I think it was 2021, and he missed the 2022 season and then came back for 2023. And his stuff was down. He was still effective overall. He had a 4.50 ERA with the Red Sox last year. But he's a guy who's had plus stuff in his career, and he's been a high upside player. It's just one of those high risk, high reward injury or type deals where you're going to expect him to probably get injured at some point. But when he's on the mound, he's usually pretty solid. But like I said, the stuff was down last year. Maybe the Dodgers are kind of betting on that being him getting back under his first full season out of Tommy John surgery. But it's an interesting signing for them. You probably have your 5 starters in the rotation right now. So makes sense. You get a lefty in your rotation, and he's got a fun nickname. It's Big Maple because he's Canadian. So it's going to be fun to use that throughout the year.
Yeah, I think for me, first and foremost, it sort of does check off the box of adding another starting pitcher. And we're going to get into some of Paxton's injuries because I think that is sort of the elephant in the room. But, you know, I was very open with my belief that I thought the Dodgers needed, you know, one starter, if not even a second one, maybe, even though, yes, Tyler Glasnow and Yoshinobu Yamamoto are great additions. But again, as people who have been with us, I've said, you know, in other shows that the Dodgers also traded from their rotation depth and Ryan Pepio to get Glasnow. And while that was you know, an upgrade in potential and the ceiling, like, you still lost a pitcher who the Dodgers arguably were going to count on their rotation. And so Paxton certainly, you know, hopefully he can stay on the healthier side. He'll fill that need. And like you said, you know, injuries are a little bit of concern with him. And so you gave us your thoughts, and I'm going to ask people who are watching this live to throw your opinion in the chat while I sort of go over some of Paxton's starts. The 2023 season, he made 19 of them. He spent it with the Boston Red Sox. Like you said, he missed all of 2022. He was recovering from Tommy John surgery that he had in 2021, which limited him to just one start. But while he was on his rehab assignment in 2022, he suffered, I think it was a grade 2, lat tear. And so that basically ended his rehab assignment, ended his comeback bid. You go to 2020, shortened season. Obviously, he made 5 starts for the Yankees. 2019, he made 29 starts for the Yankees as well. 2018, he made 28 starts for the Mariners. And 2017, he made 24 starts for the Mariners as well. If you want to go back to 2016, that was 20 starts. And then earlier, like, the number does decline, but that was much earlier into his career. So last season also, if we're discussing injuries, Paxton did finish on the 15-day IL, but that was because at the end of September, he had right knee inflammation. So he, you know, sort of made it through, 19 starts. I guess it's not necessarily making it through a full season, but he was pitching towards the end of the year until kind of the knee injury. And of course, the Red Sox also didn't necessarily have anything to play for at that point. So I think, let me see if we have any comments. There's some concern. So Big says Buehler and Glasnow will go on the ghost IL potentially. Eddie wants Paxton to eat up some innings, hopefully. What do you think, kind of, while we get more comments in here, what do you think the signing of Paxton means for maybe somebody like Ryan Yarbrough? Because to me, I sort of view them in the same similar light as left-handers, maybe not necessarily going to light up the radar gun?
I think Paxton is more of a pure starting pitcher, where Yarbrough they kind of see as an in-between swingman type. He can come out of the bullpen, or he can start games if you needed. I think it means more for some of the other guys in the rotation. Now they have the ability to start Buehler on the IL and let him rehab, which is something they kind of wanted to do and were planning on to limit his innings. Gives you some protection to not have to use Yamamoto on 5 days every time out if you want to give him some extra rest there. You don't have to put as much pressure on Emmett Sheehan to come in and take another step forward and be a guy who can lock down the 4th or 5th spot for you. It just gives you more depth in the rotation and kind of takes pressure off the other guys in that mix. So now instead of looking at Yarbrough and Grove as your potential number 5, now you have James Paxton as your number 4 or number 5, and it just pushes everyone else back. So it's just good to add pitchers like that, especially with how the Dodgers are going to be utilizing their staff this year. Everyone's going to get some rest and time off. It won't be a 6-man rotation, maybe not. They might not call it that, but it's effectively going to work like one. So you needed to add another arm. They get a lefty with some upside, some injury concern, which is why you're able to get him cheaper on a 1-year deal. But it's just a good signing for them, I think, and it just helps lengthen out their rotation.
Yeah, and I sort of misspoke. I shouldn't have necessarily compared Paxton velocities to Yarbrough's, because he can get up to, I think, about 95 miles an hour. So that is one difference. And like you said, another is that Paxton is more of a pure starter. We do have some comments now. Carlos says, 0 concerns with this move. Give us 100 innings would be great. Let's see. THP says he always has injuries. Yes, I think that's obviously the biggest concern. But again, it is only a 1-year deal, and Paxton is certainly more of a depth piece, like you alluded to. They're not necessarily going to count on him to make 30 starts in an entire season. Laura says the phrase "eat up innings" gives her PTSD. I think this is a fair point, and one we can sort of discuss. The Dodgers, I think, are certainly hoping that Paxton fits more of the mold of Andrew Heaney and Tyler Anderson, and not necessarily Noah Syndergaard or Lance Lynn, who was a little bit different from the aforementioned names in that he was acquired at the trade deadline. It's safe to assume that, yes, there are kind of injury concerns with Paxton, but is there more confidence or optimism that he'll fall into kind of that former group, like I mentioned, with Heaney and Anderson and the success they had with the Dodgers?
I think it's fair to bet on somewhere in the middle, and I know we're going to laugh at that comment because it's the one Scott always takes and the cop-out answer, but I mean, it's hard to expect him to come in and do what Tyler Anderson did and be an all-star, and I don't think he'll be as bad as Noah Syndergaard or Lance Lynn types. So, I mean, I think Paxton would be a little closer to Tyler Anderson just because when I was looking at his Stuff Plus before I came out here, his changeup was his highest graded pitch with 112 Stuff Plus, which was the 4th highest in baseball. The other pitches were down a bit. His fastball was 95, and overall he was at 89, but he had good location and control, and his changeup was effective. So the Dodgers really relied on their changeup with Tyler Anderson to help make him effective. So maybe they tell him to start utilizing that more, go back to using his cutter more. His cutter was his worst pitch, but maybe they can make a tweak there because that's what helped make him effective before when he was pitching at a very high level with the Mariners. But like you said, he still has a fastball that can reach up to 97 and averages around 94, 95. So I think there's good upside there. It's just probably going to be, they think there's some tweaks they can make there, help him get on track. And really, you don't need him to be that Tyler Anderson type all-star piece. You just need him to come in and be a solid number 5, which is essentially like a 4 to 4.5 ERA type guy. And I think he's very capable of doing that.
Yeah, really quick, just because I see this, and now I'm seeing it too in my video. No, not this one. Aaron wants to know, is it me or is Matt's right shelf really crooked? I think it could just be sort of the way I'm sitting, and when I have like my laptop stand, maybe it's not balanced properly right now. So I do apologize. My shelves are straight. I can assure you of that. But thanks for again. I'm sorry that does look kind of funny, and now I can't unsee it, so it's going to bother me the rest of the show. So let me ask you, Blake, kind of a 2-part question. What are your expectations for James Paxton this season, and what are reasonable expectations in terms of like maybe starts and innings pitched type thing? And if those are one and the same and it's the same answer, then that's fine too.
I feel like it's going to be the same answer. Like I would hope for around 120 innings of maybe a 4.25 ERA. And I think that's a fair expectation for him. you're not really looking for much more after that point. Like anything extra he gives you would be great. But I think later down the line in the season, you're going to start to rely on the younger pitchers a little more, maybe see them take a step forward. Maybe you get Walker Buehler coming back, pitching at a high level by then as well. So I think it's more a move focused on the first half of the season to help them get through that. And then anything else after there is just like icing on top of it. So I don't think you're going to be looking at like a 6 or 7 ERA guy like Noah Syndergaard. And I don't think you're going to get like a mid-2s, high or low 3s ERA type guy. So I think that's a fair expectation for him. He's averaged 85 innings in a season, and a lot of that was due to his first part of his career when he was averaging less than 70 for the first 3 years, and then more recently he was at 96 and then 1.1 in 2021. But usually he's around like the 120 to 160 mark.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I see there were people agreeing with you. I think THP said a 4-something. Yeah, 4-something ERA and like 85 innings. I think maybe hopefully they get a few more innings out of him. But yeah, let's see. So let's spend some time now, I think, answering questions on because I did see some good ones in here. And now I've lost it. Let's see. Terry Benthall wants to know, does that mean not signing Kershaw?
I don't think they're connected at all. Kershaw is going to come back in the second half of the season if he comes back, and he's missing the entire first half because of his surgery. So the Dodgers just needed to add someone to the rotation right now. And I think if Kershaw wants to be back, he's going to come back no matter what. If he wants to retire or go to the Rangers, that's going to be his choice. But the Dodgers are leaving a spot open for Kershaw, regardless of what else they do this offseason.
Yeah, I agree. And if you guys, I think, we did discuss Kershaw on our Sunday, I guess yesterday. I thought today was Tuesday for a second, our Sunday live show. And I think one thing with Kershaw that could potentially happen is he doesn't, whether it's with the Dodgers or I guess the Rangers, if you will, he's probably not going to sign, I think, at this point until the start of spring training when the 60-day injured list becomes a factor. And so they could, sign him and kind of put him on that basically right away. And it helps with the 40-man logjam which, if the Dodgers, if and when this Paxton signing is made official, if there aren't any other moves before it, then it's going to bring the 40-man roster full once again. And so that's something the Dodgers are going to have to navigate. And, potentially related to that, Matty Man 5 Dodge wants to know, we're done now, right? So do you see any other additions? So we were asked somebody gave us an over-under on Sunday night at 1.5 major league transactions. I took, they said this winter. So I took the under because I said Kershaw would sign in spring. I didn't expect now the next day or two, like we're going to be looking at reaching 1 already. So do you see anything else for the Dodgers maybe?
I mean, I took the over, so I'm going to stick with it. And I think I'm in a good place right now. I still think they go out another reliever. My feeling right now is it's going to be Ryan Brazier, but if it's not him, I'm sure they're going to do something. Matt Moore is still someone who intrigues me a lot. They could go out and make a trade. I know in the chat, Tanner Scott's been mentioned a lot. I think that's going to cost more than the Dodgers would be willing to pay for a reliever right now, but he would be a very good arm to add to the bullpen. But they've been connected to relievers for a while now, so I think they're just kind of waiting for the market to see what makes the most sense and lines up. And then they'll try and get that deal done. It's just a matter of when it's going to happen. And then, like I said, I think Kershaw's going to come back. And depending on how you want to count that, like during the offseason or not, they could wait till spring training when they can just sign him and put him on the 60-day IL immediately and not have to use a 40-man spot, which I think is the likely scenario. But I think there's going to be a reliever move coming still, too.
Real quick, if you were with us last night, you saw a pretty colorful hat from Blake, and it was different. It wasn't bucket hat Blake. Oh, let's see, he's going to do. Yeah, that's the one he had on last night. Right Field Pavilion is digging the hat tonight, Blake. So I think you've got some momentum on your side, even though you've gone away from your bucket hat look.
Yeah, I've got a lot more Dodger hats to come since I mixed it up and got a lot of positive feedback. I'll keep throwing on different ones.
There we go. So let's get back to some questions. I did see. So yeah, TQT was asking, do you think they still go after a reliever like Brazier? They don't. They need all free agents. Blake kind of just got done. I agree answering that. And I do agree with him. I think if the Dodgers do anything else, it's going to be in the bullpen. Naz C, did they sign him? I'm assuming this is asking about James Paxton. They have not signed him yet. They have not even sort of, quote unquote, agreed to terms just yet, but it appears to be on the doorstep. And again, if you missed it, it's a 1-year deal that's going to be worth around 11 to 12 million, maybe base, and then also have some incentives built in, which Fabian Ardaya said are going to be built on, based on starts made. Let's see. So Big wants to know, does this guarantee a 6-man rotation when Buehler comes back? Blake, I know you sort of answered that in a roundabout way. Do you think you think that they will basically use a 6-man rotation without officially calling it a 6-man rotation?
Yeah, it's kind of what they've been doing. Like, they get guys rest and time off without actually calling it a 6-man rotation or having 6 set starters. Like, they'll probably mix in Yarbrough and bullpen games and Michael Grove for some starts and just keep changing it around to get each guy rest. And by the time Buehler comes back, there's probably going to be another injury because that's just how it works out. There's always injuries in the rotation. There's always a need for starting pitching. So whether they effectively call it a 6-man rotation or however they end up managing it, guys are going to get rest, and it's going to be their plan throughout the season.
Yeah, I agree with you. Let's see. I did see another one. Somebody was saying trade for Clase. And Blake, I know you, a couple of weeks ago, we discussed this possibility. Here we go. It's from Nando 390. You want to kind of reiterate why that's an unlikely option for the Dodgers?
If the Dodgers wouldn't meet the cost on Dylan Cease, they're not meeting it on Clase. I don't think they'd pay that price for any reliever. The last time there was a big reliever trade like that, it was Edwin Diaz to the Mets when they gave up Jared Kelenic, who was one of the top prospects in baseball at the time. And he hasn't really panned out as much, but the cost on that trade was very significant. Prospect evaluators thought the Mets got fleeced essentially. So it's going to be a similar deal to that, like where you're going to have to give up a James Outman possibly, or start the deal with an Emmett Sheehan or some kind of significant overpay like that the Dodgers won't be comfortable doing, and I don't think any fans would want to see them doing.
Yeah, I agree. Here's another question from Roman Velasquez. Where does this leave us with Kershaw? Again, if you missed it a few minutes ago, basically the Paxton signing and honestly any other move that the Dodgers have done this offseason maybe still will potentially do, even though we don't necessarily see a whole lot at this point on the table, is independent of Clayton Kershaw's future. Andrew Friedman has made it clear that as long as Kershaw wants to come back, the Dodgers will welcome him back. I personally believe that Kershaw's agency and the Dodgers probably have some sort of understanding in terms of what his salary would need to be for, I assume, another 1-year contract. And so with the Kershaw thing, it's basically just a matter of if and when he sort of decides what he wants to do. And Kershaw, I think, was it about a month ago or 6 weeks ago when he was on with David Vassay on 570, he said his rehab is going well and he's excited to pitch next season. So that's where that sort of stands. This doesn't really have any bearing on that at all. Let's see. So we'll keep answering. Michael Correa. This might be the second time he asked this, but I can't find the first one. I'm pretty sure it was him. He wants to know if the Dodgers can sign Whit Merrifield, and in his first time asking it, he included and also trade Manuel Margot. So do you see either one of those scenarios popping up?
I don't see it happening. If the Dodgers were to do something like that, I think the spot would be for Kike to come back. But I think they're just kind of set on the position player side. I don't really expect anything to happen there the rest of the offseason. They have Miguel Vargas as their depth piece in the minor leagues who's going to start out there. And if they need another bat, it's probably going to be him. They'll probably add some minor league signings, older veteran types who can come in and possibly compete or just stay in AAA for the year. So I don't think any other position player signings are really going to happen. I think if anything else happens, it's just going to be for a reliever.
Here's we're going to break this up a little bit. Not a question, but I think a pretty good, funny comment from Paul Charles. I think Paxton deferred his $11 million for 12 months. And he adds, just kidding. Obviously, deferred money has been all the rage this offseason with the Dodgers doing that. Here's a good question from EB. It is off topic, but I think it's important for us to answer. He wants to know, do you guys have to watch how you critique the Dodgers on YouTube since the Dodgers might revoke your press passes? No, we don't. We're fortunate that the Dodgers are understanding that we do, us and media have a job to do. And if the team is playing poorly that they can be criticized. Obviously, what we refrain from are kind of the personal attacks for no reason, just because that's not necessary and not professional, and we wouldn't want to see anybody doing that in general. But Blake and I have, dating back to last offseason and throughout this past season, we're very open as with our criticism, I guess I'll put it that way, of the Dodgers free agency planning last year and kind of the team that they then put together and the trade deadline and how that went. So no, we don't. And hopefully you guys, hopefully that comes across that, you know, we, as much as we want to see the team do well, like if things aren't necessarily going how we think they should, you know, we will kind of voice that opinion. And here's another one that I think should be addressed to. JR says Mookie is too selfish. He wants to be a leadoff hitter, but he'd make a great two hitter, or else a rise would make sense, having three guys hitting 300. I think Mookie in years past was open about his preference to hit in the leadoff spot, but at spring training last year, he said that that was no longer a concern or priority for him, and he was open to hitting wherever the Dave Roberts wanted him to in the Dodgers lineup. I think looking at the team they had last year and looking at the group again this year, Mookie in the leadoff spot does make sense. I thought if you want to go back a little bit further, if there was a true conversation to be had, I thought it was when Trey Turner was still around, especially because at the time Mookie wasn't really stealing any bases. And so I felt that, you know, Trey Turner could be the leadoff man there. Blake, is there anything you want to add on either of these last two questions we received?
No, I think you summed them up pretty well, especially about the first one. I think we've done a good job of criticizing them when they deserve it, and we've been fair and praised them when they also deserve it. Last offseason, we were very critical of them throughout the season, and especially in the playoffs when they made some of their decisions to start David Peralta and Lance Lynn and then leave Lance Lynn in. And then this offseason, we've given them a lot of praise for all the moves they made. So I think we've done a pretty balanced job there and have been fair. But yeah, it's not something that the Dodgers are looking out and watching us over.
Yeah. Here's a question from GI. Does Buehler return to form, or was he a product of the sticky stuff? And this is teed up for Blake, I feel like, and I'm I am on the other end of the scale. I think before I let Blake sort of answer this, I'll just say, like, I recognize that Buehler's Blake, what stat are you going to use? Stuff plus? Is that what you're going to come at me with? Okay. Yeah. So make sure I cite it correctly. His stuff plus declined after the sticky stuff ban. I think that some of that could have been related to potential injury. I think some of it could be having to adjust if he was, you know, among the pitchers using whatever substances were sort of allowed and kind of glanced over at the time. I still think that Buehler can be a pretty effective pitcher. Is it, you know, the frontline ace starter that maybe we thought he was going to be in 2020 type thing? Not necessarily, but I think he could be a very good number two, maybe probably more likely topping out like middle of the rotation guy. And now I'll turn it over to Blake, who's a little bit more skeptical than I am.
Yeah, I have concerns about Buehler with the stuff drop that he had, and just his stuff was down, and that's the most concerning thing to me. His fastball velocity has been declining. His break wasn't as sharp, and his location struggled a bit, and maybe that was due to the sticky stuff and having to adjust to that, but it's still a concern to me until you see a pitcher actually come back out and prove that they can pitch without it. And then combined with the second Tommy John surgery, that's probably going to make his stuff decline a little more. It's concerning to me. Essentially, we have a very long video where me and Jeff talked about this and debated it extensively for probably like 30 minutes or something. So I don't want to go too much more into it here, but I think it's fair to be a bit skeptical about what he might bring and hope for better than what he was the last time he was on the mound.
So here's since Lisa Rise seems to be a popular name. This one's from Norm Lee. He said, if a Rise can be had, I would hope Freeman would go after him. It would be ideal to shed Taylor's $15 million salary. I mean, I guess like if you want to add another talented player to the roster, then okay. But remember, the plan is for Mookie Betts to play second base pretty much on an everyday basis moving forward. I guess like if Luisa Rise could be had at the right cost, maybe the Dodgers do it and move Mookie Betts back to right field. But I think that would cause a lot of kind of roster changes pretty late in the offseason at this point, because if you look at what they've done over the offseason, bringing Jason Hayward back, signing Teoscar Hernandez, acquiring Manuel Margot along with Tyler Glasnow, like Mookie clearly is not part of the outfield mix. So like, do you see like, I guess if the Marlins call the Dodgers and say, hey, Luis Ariz is available, make us a decent offer, then maybe they do it. But short of that, do you see this as a possibility?
I don't think so. I don't think they'd really match up. For starters, it doesn't make sense for the Marlins, in my opinion, because they have a lot of good young starting pitchers, but they've been looking for offense for the last 5 years now, it seems like. So I just don't get why they'd finally go out and get a good hitter and then trade him away. And maybe they're trying to sell high, which is like what the Dodgers did with D. Gordon after his strong season. But the Marlins aren't necessarily the kind of group that's going to go out and make a brilliant trade and sell high on their player and or go spend in free agency to help fill around him. So I just don't really get what they're thinking there. I'm not sure he's actually available more than a team just kind of saying like, hey, would you trade him, and doing their due diligence there. So I don't think it's a possibility. Like I said earlier, I think the Dodgers are set on their position player side.
And so Norm did follow it up by saying, yes, move Betts back to right field. A full-time Hayward is ridiculous. Hayward will be platooning in right field, so not quite full-time, I guess, sort of half-time, 60% of the time type thing, which if you still think that that's too much, then, that's a conversation that can be had during the season. But, I mean, Hayward did do well in his role last year, and so kind of keeping him in that same position moving forward, I personally don't have an issue with. Blake, I don't know if you do.
When they first signed him, I was a little annoyed by it. I would have liked to see them upgrade, and I had some concerns about his hitting profile moving forward and how sustainable it was. So, I mean, if they were replacing Hayward, I would still be on board with it, but I don't think that's going to happen. And essentially, if Hayward's like your 8th or 9th best hitter in the lineup, I don't think it's a huge deal. He's going to play solid defense and platoon with Margot or Chris Taylor. So you'll have a solid player there regardless of what happens, I think.
Yeah, so we sat down to talk about James Paxton in the starting rotation, but I feel like we've shifted now towards a lot of Mookie stuff. And here's another one from Jim. He says, if Mookie wants to lead off, he needs to step up in the stolen base department. Blake, what does your computer tell you about stolen bases? I know how I feel, but I think we might have a difference of opinion here.
Generally, stolen bases have been very overrated. The benefit of stealing one is usually less than the cost of getting thrown out on the bases. Giving away an out is far worse than taking an extra base generally. So the Dodgers have not stolen much since Andrew Friedman took over, I'd say. And it's just not something they're really ever going to do or build around. Of course, some of that has changed with the new rules, making stolen bases easier, but it's still generally like you want to steal it like into 75 to 80% success rate. And if you're not stealing at that, it just doesn't make sense to steal.
Yeah. And I think maybe what Mookie is potentially lacking in the stolen base department, Freddie Freeman is there to pick it up. His sort of running joke is every year he wants to set a new career high, but only by one. This past season, he ended up exceeding it by more than that. Let me pull it up really quick. So now the bar has been raised even higher for him this season. So let's see. Last year, he went. So Freeman's career high in stolen bases was 13, which he set in 2022, and it jumped all the way up to 23 last season. So you think we're going to see a 30-30 season from Freddie Freeman anytime soon?
Well, we need 6 years for that. No, I don't think that's going to happen. I'd be shocked if he has like a 30-25 season. So we'll set the bar a little lower for him.
So do you think 30-20? You think he could do 30-25 this year?
I'm going to say no, because he's going to have like so many people on base around him all the time. He's not going to be stealing as much. You have such a stacked lineup. Teoscar behind you probably, and Will Smith and Ohtani and Mookie ahead of you. Like there's just not going to be as many opportunities.
That's fair, but I'm gonna go out on a limb and say yes. I think we get a 30-25 season from Freddie this year. Here's not a question but a comment from Dong. He says equation to win MVP equals steal bases, and yes, that was Ronald Acuna's kind of biggest calling card, I guess, right, for much of the year. And I know, Blake, you got into Braves Twitter, found a few of your tweets at various points throughout the season, which made for some entertaining situations. Let's see. So W. Sims wants to say, so is Kershaw effectively out? And he included a sad face with his question. Again, The Paxton signing, assuming it does end up happening, it does not really have any bearing on Kershaw. He's not going to be ready to pitch until about halfway through this season anyway. And Andrew Friedman has made it very clear that if Kershaw decides he wants to come back, when he decides he potentially wants to come back, that the Dodgers are ready to re-sign him and that they're going to basically have a roster spot. So I wouldn't be too concerned with that. And I did see kind of earlier in our show, people were saying move Kershaw to the bullpen. That's not likely either, just because I know, Blake, you want to explain why that won't be happening?
Do we remember the last time he pitched out of the bullpen? I think that's a fair enough point to make. But yeah, Kershaw's going to start, and I don't think it's even a consideration that he'd move to the bullpen. His stuff wouldn't play up there, and there's no reason to put him there, essentially.
Yeah. So again, another, this one's not a question, but a comment. Akira Sano says, hello, guys. I'm watching from Tokyo. Thank you for that, Akira. Welcome. We hope you've caught some of our other shows, and we'll continue to catch kind of our different shows that we do. Here's not this one. Here's a question for Hepatitis. If Hayward regresses, how would you feel about a Max Kepler trade? Something like Hayward, Knack, Jose Ramos for Kepler.
I wanted Kepler this offseason. I think one of our early shows in the offseason, I was asked about Kepler, and I said he was solid. I didn't know as much about him at the time, but I've since done some research on him, and I was all for it. Me and Scott were kind of hyping that up for a bit. So if they could get him at some point, if they needed to add an outfielder, yeah, I'm all for it. Go for it.
Yeah. This another question from Norm, who's been active in the chat. We thank you for that. If May could pitch after the All-Star break, should they use him or just let him heal for 2025? I think that if May kind of continues to progress without sort of being rushed along the process, that they'll be comfortable bringing him back this season. They definitely won't be aggressive with his rehab by any means. And so if he gets there just kind of naturally and sort of reaches the benchmarks that the Dodgers have comfortably set, then yeah, let him come back, and maybe it's a bullpen role this year until then next season you get him back into the starting rotation. Let's see. So we have a super chat from Rod. It is blank, but I did see your question before it. Oh, here we go. I think it was this one. Why are today's starters so fragile? They once pitched in 4-man rotations through 300 innings and spent far less time on the IL than current starters.
So, yeah, this is a very deep into everything type question that no one has an exact answer for, but there's some ideas around it. To start with, pitchers back then, they would retire at 30 or 31, 32. We saw it. Sandy Koufax had his career ended due to injury. And that's just kind of how they did it. And it was unfortunate for pitchers. But today, pitchers are throwing a lot more, essentially, and much more specialized. They're not throwing as much in the major league season, but it starts when players start playing baseball as kids, and they're pretty much throwing all off season. You have specialized pitchers now that you didn't used to have. And you see little leaguers throwing 100 pitches. And instead of relaxing in the off season when baseball isn't being played, they're still going and playing and doing tournaments and travel baseball and all kinds of things. So it just never stops with them. And then you also have more specialized athletes just playing baseball instead of also going to play basketball or football and using other muscle groups in your body. And you just keep putting stress on your arm as much over that time when you're just playing baseball. And then pitchers are also throwing harder now. So that could be leading into it a little bit more and trying to throw different pitches, more breaking balls than they used to. So it's just a lot of things adding up into one thing. And teams are also making bigger investments into their pitchers now. So they want to protect them more instead of saying throw 300 innings. We're paying you $30 million a year. We don't want you to blow out your arm in 3 years. So there's just a lot of things going into it. And what the specific reason is, not entirely sure if there's anything that's weighing more heavily on it, but it's a lot of things adding into one thing, essentially.
Yeah, it was a good question and a good answer from Blake to kind of sum up. I mean, basically the overarching point is that, yeah, there's not one specific reason for it. I think if there was one thing to sort of change or do differently, teams would do it, and pitchers would be maybe in a better state. But there's not a clear answer. This our next question is from Jedi Engineer, which may or may not be Blake's burner. We'll have to investigate that once we get off tonight. How does the catching situation develop over the next 3 years with our current knowledge that Smith hasn't been extended yet? So, Blake, before you answer it, I guess I'll, at the risk of maybe setting the chat on fire, I think we should probably just be preparing for Will Smith to leave in free agency. Is that safe to say?
Probably safe to say, but at the same time, it would be pretty valuable to keep him around, and they might see that value because having a top catcher is valuable. You could also move him to a different position. Maybe he's the long-term answer at third base, which is an idea I floated around, or long-term answer at first base when Freddie Freeman ends up leaving, because eventually catchers are going to need to move off the position, especially when they're a better offensive catcher. But the Dodgers have 3 prospects in the minor leagues with high upside: Dalton Rushing, Diego Cartaya, and Theron Lirizano, I believe it is. So I think that's kind of the future you're looking at there, whichever one develops the best. It's a situation they had in the past as well when it was Keibert Ruiz and Will Smith as their 2 prospect catchers, and you didn't really know who was your future there, but Will Smith was the one who stepped up and took over. So it's always hard to project these things down the line, but if I had to make a guess, I'd say it's Dalton Rushing after Will Smith is done there.
Yeah. This question's from Cheesecake22. Do the Dodgers take the entire roster to Korea? I remember when Kershaw said it took a long time for his body to readjust after coming back from Australia. And yeah, that's a great point. And Kershaw in 2014, he ended up going on the IL as soon as basically the Dodgers came back when we're ready to play their stateside opener because of his, I think it was a teres major injury, which basically like his upper back behind his shoulder blade type thing. To the best of my knowledge, I think the way this will work is they will take their 26-man active roster and then probably another handful of players or so kind of on a taxi squad scenario. And this, I mean, obviously you're making a huge trip. So you need more guys than you would normally on like maybe a road trip to Arizona, obviously. And maybe the number could end up being more because, again, like there are reports that the Dodgers are supposed to play some exhibition games before the Seoul series out there. And so maybe MLB will allow them to carry even more players than they would on top of, like I said, the extra 4 to 5 that are probably going to be traveling with them. Kind of related to that, GI says, any news on the ticket situation in Korea? So Jeff did an interview with a reporter, and his name is escaping me right now, so I do apologize for that. But it does seem, at least right now, that tickets are only going to be on sale to fans in Korea. And I think you needed to be subscribed to some sort of streaming service is what it is. We do have an article on DodgerBlue.com, so if you kind of search for that, we have that up. GI is asking, has that been confirmed? So MLB hasn't said anything, but they also haven't said anything about like when tickets will go on sale, which I think is a little interesting. And I personally just find it hard to believe that MLB would arrange these games and not allow like the Dodgers or Padres to sell, even if it was a limited number of tickets kind of directly to their fans. But at least for now, that kind of seems to be what the arrangement is. And I see Laura saying our friends Pantone 294 got tickets. I don't remember, Laura, is that recently? Because I know that they took like down their promotion about tickets and they were working on trying to get some. I think Alex actually flew out to South Korea, but yeah, I'm not 100% sure kind of where all that stands. Let's see. We'll answer a few more before we get out of here. I did see, Blake, I'll throw you. This is a question specifically for Blake. So Blake, well, I won't completely air out conversations we had with Scott and Blake after the show. They were critical of me, and so I'll let Blake have some fun here. I don't know what these names are, but are you happy about it?
Yeah, I liked it. I thought it was a cool scene. I mean, Ahsoka and Anakin are so connected. I thought it might have been a little weird to not have him in there at some way, but yeah, I mean, it was great. We'll try and stick to baseball, and I'll keep that a shorter answer.
Yeah, and if you ever want to ask Blake about Marvel, he loves answering those questions as well. So if you have any Marvel questions, definitely get those into the chat as well. Let's see. I did see a question about the Dodgers lineup. Yeah, Stephanie said, how do you feel about the Dodgers lineup? I think this is I think there's reason to feel really good about it after they signed Ohtani. And now that Teoscar Hernandez has been added, where do you sort of stand with it?
Short answer, it's very good and going to score a lot of runs this year. Longer answer, we'll see how Jason Hayward and Gavin Lux do specifically. Still have some concerns about them. It's going to be, we'll see how Ohtani does as well, coming back from his surgery, whatever it was that they weren't confirming, and how he regains his hitting ability and power. We'll see if Will Smith can have a more consistent year for the full season instead of falling off in the second half. I think we're pretty safe with Freddie Freeman and Mookie Betts being consistent there. And we'll see how James Outman does in his second full season, if he can kind of take another step forward and do better.
All right. So we're going to answer a couple more questions. I do see 2 here specifically that I've picked out, and we do have a super chat. So we'll definitely do 3. If you want to throw in another super chat at the end, we'll get to that. If not, we'll probably be winding down after these. The first one was from Juhei Verdi. How many times do the Dodgers win it all in the next 8 years?
I'll say 2. I think that's a fair number and expectation. I mean, of course, you'd want more, but it's really hard to win a World Series. And I think if they won 2 and we looked back on that, we'd all be pretty happy.
My initial thought was 2 as well. I think, like you said, the big key there is that 2 is kind of a reasonable expectation, but I think it's just so hard to win that it's probably going to be 1. Right field pavilion, what is one rule change you would like reinstated? I personally want the fake pickoff to third, throw back to first. That's a good one. If I have to pick one, so I have 2, and they are getting back to real baseball, which would be eliminating the DH, and honestly making the American League get rid of it. Let's
Can
play
you
real
clarify
baseball.
that you don't want Ohtani on the team?
Well, no, I mean, fine. But that notwithstanding, the other one, I guess the one that I would push for more is the ghost runner rule. I think it's just so lame.
See, now you're going to set me up to have the bad answer here, because I like the ghost runner rule because I don't think you need to play like 14 innings in the regular season. And on top of that, I would also say bring back the doubleheader rule where they were 7-inning games instead of 9, because no one needs to watch 7 hours of baseball in a single day, like when you want to see the results and see your team win. And I know that's going to be a unpopular take, and I'll probably get some pushback there, but we've seen so much throughout the time that the regular season's kind of meaningless and pointless, especially how the Dodgers have proven that with 100 wins and then falling off in the playoffs. So, I mean, I don't think we need that long of games. It's going to add to injuries, and you want to keep guys healthy.
All right, fair enough. Let's get to our super chat from Massimo. Blake, where do you see Paxton in this rotation? What are the Dodgers' future catcher? Do they keep Barnes or go to the farm system? So he's getting a lot of bang for his buck here. He loaded his question for you.
Paxton's going to be at the back end of the rotation, like number 4, number 5. And I'm not sure the Dodgers will even specifically set an order and give them numbers like that. It'll just work out where he's going to be pitching after Buehler and maybe before or after Sheehan, depending on how they want to set that up. But he's not going to be someone they rely on, essentially, and it's just to add some depth and innings to their rotation. For the catcher one, I think Barnes is staying for the full year, if that's what the question's asking here. And if they were to replace him for whatever reason, that would probably go to Hunter Fiducia. But I think Fiducia is just going to be the number 3 catcher for the year, and Barnes is going to be the number 2.
All right. Thank you for that, Massimo, and thank you for everybody who's been interacting with us tonight. I think we'll probably close it down. This one is from Don Kim. He says, LA Times published their 10 Hall of Fame restaurants of LA. Which restaurant would you add to the list? I actually have not seen this list yet. I didn't know that it was out. I know that they do their 101 restaurants every year. So I'll have to look up this list. I think Blake is doing it really quick, but Dong, I know you're a regular viewer, so come back to us if you can on Sunday with this question, and hopefully we'll have definitely a better answer for you at that point.
Yeah, I have to log in, so I have to go get that info. I can't get it right now.
Yeah, there we go. So apologies for that, Dong, but you've put it on our radar, so thank you for that. We'll definitely get to it if you're able to. If it's not this Sunday, if it's the week after that, or if we're doing another live show, then throw it up. Here we go, Blake. BMR. Maybe we should end with this one. Favorite Marvel superhero?
Superman, just for Matt.
Oh, geez, come on.
Okay, my real answer is Spider-Man, but for anyone who's not a normal person here with us, Matt always calls Star Wars as Star Trek, so I'll start calling Marvel as DC.
All right, there we go. Mine is, you can see it back there. Probably the glove might be giving it away, is Iron Man. And under the glove that you can't see, I need to do some rearranging, is the Iron Man helmet. So he's definitely my favorite. And normally after Endgame, Marvel films have really sucked. I agree with that. And it's been unfortunate to see the direction the Marvel franchise has sort of gone in since then. I want bring back all the old Avengers and let's give them another movie and just sort of get them back together to entertain everybody. So that was it. So again, thank you everybody for tuning in live with us. This was an unexpected show. If you missed it, obviously the news tonight and the reason we were here was the Dodgers and James Paxton still, I guess it hasn't been reported that they have agreed. So still on the verge of agreeing to a 1-year contract that is likely going to be worth about 11 to 12 million and include some incentives. And so his addition sort of rounds out the starting rotation, if you will, adds some depth. And yes, there are some injury concerns, but it gives the Dodgers sort of another pitcher that they can count on and a little added flexibility. And again, the impact on Clayton Kershaw, none really. If that signing is going to happen, it was going to happen with or without James Paxton. So again, thanks for joining us. That's Blake. I'm Matthew, and we'll see you next time.